This is a Laney L20 that a client brought in with 4 other amps, some of which definitely needed work, that blonde basement and that gutted and rebuilt deluxe reverb especially. And then that Dr. Z Maz Mark II with reverb, which did not need any work. And an AC30 hand-wired head that had been previously modded, that'll be gotten to next, and this Laney L20. And he just wanted to know if it could be improved or made more reliable. And the answer is no, it really doesn't need to have any work done on it for 2 reasons. Number one, it sounds good and operates well, as is. I did clean it. It was dusty. Other than that, no big whoop. The other thing is when this amp does need service, the service will either be very easy to do if it's one of the through-hole components, or very difficult unless the schematic is forthcoming, because it's got a lot of surface mount stuff, and I'll show that before the video is over. And if, say, a surface mount resistor burns out and you can't measure what it was, if you don't have the schematic, it's really difficult. With a through-hole resistor, it's easier to change from Vortex, and resistors rarely burn, and you can still measure the value. It's a little bit trickier with surface mount stuff. But anyway, here's how the amp sounds. I'm a little bit close to it, so there's a little bit of a buzz. But that's their drive. It's got a digital reverb built in. It's okay. It's got a bright switch, which affects clean and dirty. It's got tone where the Vox has cut. Gets a little brash, but it gets up in that hard rock area. For some smoother stuff, let's see how it does. Well, I don't think anyone's going to be making Robin Ford lose any sleep with this app, but you know, it's not a bad sound. Here's the clean stuff. I think it's got a little bit of an identity crisis. It's got 4 EL84s, and the styling of the cabinet is very much inspired by Vox and Marshall, with a certain nod towards Vox. And with the EL84s, the sound is, I mean this in a nice way, believe it or not. The sound is if someone had heard a Vox described but had never played one, and they're giving what people say they sound like. I don't think it sounds as good as a Vox. I don't think it sounds as good as a Fender. I think it's in an uncomfortable in-between spot, but it's not a bad amp. And I'm sure someone could get some fantastic sounds from it. But it's not worth investing any effort in to make, quote, better or even more reliable, just because there's so many issues with it as far as long-term reliability. And I'll show what those are. All right, take a look inside the thing. There's a mixture of through-hole components for the tube stuff, and that's good because it's the tube stuff that's most likely to cause a component to fail. So they've got 1/2 watt and 1 watt through-hole stuff, and I don't see anything really wrong with it. It's an okay quality PCB. Seems to be double-sided. Got a lot of header connections and quick connects. radioelectrolytics, but nothing bad, you know. You have to look at what the price point is. And for the price point, this is pretty good. They've got vents in the PCB around the output tubes to handle heat dissipation. Much better solder joints on those L84 sockets than you find in a Blues Junior. Again, with through-hole higher wattage stuff, I suspect that these 5-watt components might be better mounted off the board, but there's no sign of any problem here. It's got some massive diodes here. Again, these, if they are chosen for this current rating and power rating, because there's actual current there, they should be mounted off the board, but it's not worth redoing that preventatively. It's got good quality caps. And then you get into the surface mount stuff, places where it's less likely to have issues. And then the preamp stuff, all right, mostly surface mount stuff on the board that holds the pots. And the pots are the same alphas and similar that many amps use, you know. My concern about the longevity of things like that is, say, R58 there in the future fails, and it fails in such a way that the component burns, and you cannot measure a burned resistor, and the writing on it would disappear typically when it burns. Unless the company shares the schematic, it can be difficult to figure out what should go back in there. If on a through-hole resistor there's an issue, let me call one up for us. On a through-hole resistor, you can usually read the stripes. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes the just heat from a failure will discolor the stripes, but it gives you a little bit of a leg up, and it's more text can change the through-hole stuff than can work well on the surface mount stuff. But, you know, it's like a phone or a laptop. If you expect to get 3-4 years out of it, and then something goes wrong, you know, you knew what you were signing up for. You got your 3-4 years out of it. If this is your only amp, and it's going to be your only amp for a long time, that 3-4 years isn't such a good proposition. And it may last a lot longer than that. This may make it 15-20 years, but eventually it'll need service, and that can be problematic with these things. I'm sure when it's under warranty, if there's an issue, Laney just changes out the entire affected board rather than do an actual, they don't go in there and do a spot repair on surface mount stuff. One thing that I thought was a weird gotcha, the connectors from this toroidal power transformer to the board are these headers. I believe they're 9-pin headers. And on one of them, all 9 pins are used. And on the other one, only 3 of the pins are used. And they have these wires crisscrossed. So this is the primary connection. This is the secondary connection. Only 3 here. But the headers are the same. And if this were to come disconnected and someone were to guess which one went where, you'd think, well, this one goes here and this one goes here. And that would be backwards. So I'm sure this was cost effective to use the same Molex header for each one, but take a leaf from Peavy's playbook there. Have one that has 9 connectors and one that has 3, or one that has 4, so they are different ones and they can't be mixed up, just so an owner who accidentally disconnects it is less likely to blow the thing up reconnecting it backwards. Anyway, I digress. So this is the Laney L20. And for what it is, it's a pretty good amp. If you need a small little amp, I don't know what it costs. I would say if it costs more than $700, I would have issues with that. But if it's under $700, seems okay to me. A little bit more information about this Laney. The owner sent a page of notes on this amp of problems he encountered. And some of them are legit, and some of them are very common misunderstandings about how amps work. And I'm not saying this to embarrass the owner, and I'm not saying this to embarrass anyone. And come on, guys, in your comments, let's keep it civil. Don't make anyone feel bad. We all have to learn this stuff. The number one complaint is this channel has excessive hum, especially plugged into the high input with the volume knob on the clean channel anywhere above 6. Let's set it to 8. Then it says this was with the guitar cable plugged in, but no guitar connected. Well, there's that hum. You will always have hum on an amplifier if you have a guitar cable plugged in, but nothing on the other end of the cable. That's because you have made an antenna. This is a silent switching plug that I use so that I don't have a pop when I change guitars. So right now, it's grounded out, the same as if I were plugged into a guitar and the volume is at 0. If I move this tab as if it's plugged into a guitar so it's not grounded out, this becomes just a regular cable. And what you're hearing, that hum, that's normal. That's not a fault of the amp. Any amp will do that. That's how they work. So again, I'm not trying to embarrass anyone, I'm trying to educate people. And if you did not know that, you don't have to bust yourself out, but you need to know that. And it says, if you remove the guitar cable from the input jack, almost all the hum goes away. Grounding issue? No, that's how they work. Related, if you have the clean volume at 7 and crank the tone control, you get more nasty hum and fizz. That's white noise. That's the sound of what's called thermal noise. Tubes have some white noise. Resistors have some white noise. If I plugged in the guitar right now, this would be really loud, and you have the max treble in the output. You can turn that down and dial that out very nicely. This amp would still be loud, still have a very nice high end at this point. It just wouldn't be hissy. So that's why this tone circuit is there. L84s are very bright tubes, and there's something called reflected impedance between the L84s and the primary output transformer, where because of the way that works, I'm not going to get too far into the technical stuff on this, it makes high frequencies really a bit exaggerated. Now that's why this amp has got a kind of a harsh sound overall, no matter where the tone controls are set, and it's bright even with the tone down and the treble turned down. This is not going to sound like a Dumble or a super reverb or something. But this white noise is normal. Many amps do that. A Marshall 100 watt does that a lot more at about 6 dB more volume. All right, so drive channel, same hum issue as clean channel. Well, yeah, you will get the same hum issue if you have a cable plugged in with no guitar. And because you have drive, it'll be even noisier than the hum you get off the clean channel. So again, that's very normal for all amps. It's not a fault with the Laney. Then it says, if you crank the drive and drive volume to 10, you get some seriously harsh, loud white noise. With the same settings, if you dime the treble and tone pots, it sounds like a steam pipe rupture. Well, yeah, let me do this with a guitar unplugged. Drive on 10. Let's do the drive volume at 7. In drive mode, treble cranked, tone cranked. It sounds pretty horrible, doesn't it? It's on the verge of oscillation. If I were to tap those tubes, it might ring out and go into oscillation. I will say that a great amp will not oscillate when you have everything cranked, but many great amps are right on the verge of that. And you will never, ever play like this, even if the amp is stable, because it would sound terrible if you were to go to a sane high-end setting on the amp and then have drive and drive volume cranked. This would be really loud, and there's white noise, but the oscillation doesn't happen. So yeah, if I were building an amp like this, any amp I build, or if this were a Marshall or a Vox or Fender or Hiwatt or any amp that I was working on, I would not let it out of my shop with that. I make sure that amps have everything cranked and are still stable. But this is pretty much how most people would ever use this amp. Say, probably not turn the drive volume, which is the master volume for this channel, over about 6. This is loud, this is a lot of distortion, and with sane real-world settings, the amp is stable and sounds pretty good. Let's see, when the amp is on and standby is set to run, if you turn off the power, you get a pretty significant pop coming through the speaker. It's not too bad. Let's do it on the clean channel. All right. If you put it in standby first, it's much less. So this is a case of doc, it hurts when I do this. Don't do that. I'm really not being snarky. I mean, there's just no other way to say it. Run standby doesn't do a lot in this particular amp at power up. You can use it if you want. It certainly lessens that pop when you power the amp off. So there you go. Just put it in standby first. Bright switch pops and cracks. There's just the slightest. That's something I could fix if I were to go in there and put a 4.7 meg or 10 meg across that switch. It's not necessary. That's not going to hurt anything. And honestly, you're not going to be changing that setting mid-song very often. And if you do, actually about the same amount of pop. Reverb is not great. Don't know how much you can do to improve or replace that. It's a digital reverb circuit. None of them are great that are built into amps. It is what it is. As far as everything else in this list, I already went through that in the previous part of this video. So again, I'm not trying to embarrass the owner. I'm not trying to embarrass anyone. These are things about amplifiers that all of us learn at some point. I know that I made some horrible, weird sounds with my first amp, which was, I think, a Gorilla, if you guys remember those. Gorillas were terrible, terrible practice amps in the 80s. And then I got a Stage 85, and I just thought I had won, because it had clean, it had distortion, and it had reverb. And I saved up and mowed a lot of lawns and bought I think it was a DOD chorus pedal. And between the DOD chorus and the reverb and the lead sound in that Stage 85, I just thought I was ready to take on the world. And I have many more guitars and better guitars than I did then, and I certainly am privileged to play an awful lot of nice amps. Very nice amps that, 16-year-old me, 15-year-old me would have died to play. I try to still find the enthusiasm that I had with that little Stage 85, because that feeling when you first sound at all like your heroes, you realize you can do it. That's a great feeling, and it's easy for someone in my position to get jaded, and so I still try to find the joy in music and the joy in guitars and the joy in amplifiers. But along with that, I also have to realize that I'm not exactly Methuselah here, and I'm not exactly Solomon. I'm not the font of all wisdom, and we're all learning. And if I came across too harsh in that blonde basement video yesterday, I'm sorry. It was the end of a long, frustrating day. And while I don't regret anything that I said, I think I probably could have found some better, more positive ways to get that same information out. That said, If I'm seeing someone build an amp for themselves on a forum, I sit on my hands a lot and I just try to be positive and say, well, you might want to look into redoing the output. You did it just like Fender did, but that's not actually legal. Here's how you need to do it. So, that grounding kind of works. It's not optimal. I support a lot of people learning how to do this on various forums. As soon as you sell that amplifier, as soon as your little hobby leaves your kitchen table and you're selling it to someone else, you're presenting yourself um, in the big leagues. This and in theory, you're presenting yourself as competition for guys like me. And those of us who really do this have a guild-like mentality about it. There aren't a lot of guilds left, but there's a certain set of skills that we all accumulate, and there's a craft to it, and to a degree there's an art to it, and we try to support each other and learn from each other. But there are people I shut up and listen when they speak, and there are people who do the same for me, and there are people who should do the same for me and for the guys who've been doing even longer than me, say Bruce Egnater. And they don't, because it's the internet and they think everyone's opinion is equal. And it gets irritating. And the constant flood of bad kit builds that I see out there, not only does it make me angry because it devalues what I actually do, it makes me angry on behalf of the musicians, because I was that kid so excited to get that Fender Stage 85, little solid state thing from the mid 80s. And if I had been saving up and mowing lawns to buy what I was told was an exact copy of a blonde bassman, and I got the thing and it didn't sound very good, I wouldn't have known why. I'd spent the money. I did my research. It had Sozos. It had Mercury. It looked pretty. To my eyes, it looked just like the ones from the 60s. I just never sound good to it. Maybe it's me. No, I want the kid who mows grass to save up to buy an amp. I want him or her to be able to go out and get something really good. And I'd much rather she buy a Blues Junior with $100 worth of work done to make it not catch on fire than spend $900 on what she thinks is a great amp that's really not. That's really, really not. And part of the joy of amplifiers and the joy of guitar and the joy of music is discernment. If everything is good, then nothing is. And I can't play along with that mentality. I think we should really hold up the things that are great, and we should recognize the things that are not. And when the things that are not are taking money from musicians who would otherwise be able to get the things which are great, I have a problem with that. Anyway, this little Laney 120 is L20 is working as well as it possibly could. The problems reported are not actual problems. It does not sound great. It will never sound great. It is not worth spending any money to make sound great. So I think, as I just told the owner on the phone, I just certified that it's working well. Sell it for something that will let you make really good music. That's my opinion from my position of 30 years of experience of working on and playing amplifiers.